Good evening. My name is Bennett Campbell Ferguson, and I am your host for the Healthy Orange Movie Reviews. Tonight's video is the first in a series I'll be doing about my favorite films of the 2000s, anything made between 2000 and 2009. And I'm going to begin by talking about Bernardo Bertolucci's The Dreamers. Now, The Dreamers was released in America in early 2004, and it's the story of Matthew, a young American who goes to Paris in 1967 to study French, but is far, far more passionate about movies. He goes to the Cinematheque Theater, which was the legendary cinema palace that was famous for showing not just great movies, but horrible movies, anything they could get their hands on. And it is there that he meets the twins, T.H.O and Isabel, who come to shape his destiny through the course of the film. So, The Dreamers is first and foremost a story about friendship, about how Matthew bonds with T.H.O and Isabel over their mutual love of films, whether it's Charlie Chaplin or anything starring Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers. But it's not just about that. It's one of the interesting things about this dynamic is that Matthew, on the surface, is incredibly naive. He's quiet, he's nervous, and he's not particularly impressive. He just doesn't exude powers. Basically, he's a nerd, although basically a good person. Whereas T.H.O and Isabel on the surface seem incredibly slick. They have great taste in art and fashion. Isabel, played by the gorgeous Ava Green, wears an incredibly cool red beret in the first scene where we see her. And they just seem very worldly. And a big part of the dynamic of the film is them sort of I'm hesitant to say lording their worldliness over Matthew, but they seem to enjoy their mentorship over him and the chance to sort of beckon him into their world. And they do beckon him in, and that's one of the interesting things about the film. Whereas most movies about love and friendship play out with characters meeting in coffee shops and going to each other's houses, well, The Dreamers is completely different. Fairly soon into the movie, in fact, T.H.O and Isabel actually invite Matthew to live with them when they barely know him, which he accepts because he thinks they're incredibly cool, and they are. And so from that point on, the movie remains confined mostly to T.H.O and Isabel's apartment and the adventures that they have with Matthew there. Some of which justifiably earn the movie's NC-17 rating. So, viewer discretion advised. But the movie is about more than just friendship and just a duo of experienced characters lording their experience over an unexperienced character. It's also, for one thing, it's incredibly funny. There are just so many moments that I love, like the one where T.H.O says, do you know what Godard said? Nicholas Ray is cinema. I haven't seen any Nicholas Ray movies, but I deeply relate to that kind of enthusiasm. But beyond that, The Dreamers is a coming-of-age story. It's about how Matthew slowly begins to realize that T.H.O and Isabel are not as worldly and experienced as they seem. And in fact, They're just kids. And that's the interesting conundrum of the film. Over the course of the movie, T.H.O., Isabel end up choosing to basically stay in their apartment and never leave. And they end up shacked up there with Matthew, where they do almost nothing. They just basically sit around and talk and do drugs and hang out. They enclose themselves off from the world, which is beginning to seem more foreboding and frightening as, since this is the 60s, France begins to undergo some revolutionary changes. And Matthew, T.H.O., and Isabel turn away from that and choose to spend their days basically having fun. And the irony is, by doing this, by shutting themselves off from the rest of the world, they're making a bold statement. They're choosing to defy what society expects of them. They're choosing not to go to school, not to try and meet a diverse group of people, not to even get jobs. But at the same time, as bold a statement as this is, they're really regressing into a childlike state. They're being kids, and indeed much of the movie revolves around them just playing. Like in a scene where Isabel, in a pair of white overalls and sunglasses, starts dancing around the apartment with a mop, mimicking a scene from a Marlene Dietrich movie. And so, as worldly as T.H.O. and Isabel try to be, they are really just children who want to play, even though they're in their late teens, early 20s. And that's something I think that is very relatable, that desire to appear very worldly and very experienced and very cool, but at the same time wanting to be a kid, wanting to have fun, wanting to not have responsibilities. And I relate to that, absolutely. And the interesting thing is, I think Matthew does too, throughout the movie. He starts out by being totally entranced by T.H.O. and Isabel, and then as he starts to discover that they're rather immature and don't want to grow up, don't really want to connect with anyone outside of their little world, he begins to turn the tables on them and begins to point out to them their flaws and tell them, you're not going to grow up if you keep doing this, if you keep shutting yourself off from the rest of the world, if you keep only looking to each other for friendship. And so the movie is about Matthew, who initially appears very weak-willed, about him learning to stand up to T.H.O. and Isabel, and getting to the point where he can say, yes, I admire you, yes, I love you, but I also disagree with a lot of your beliefs, and I want to go on this journey with you as you grow beyond your immaturity and your vulnerabilities. And so I love that journey about Matthew, this shy guy, this film nerd who is in the shadow, very much in the shadow of T.H.O. and Isabel, about him realizing that he has something to teach them. He can help them grow up as he grows up. And Bernardo Bertolucci, working with a truly fantastic team, production designer Genre Boss, and the cinematographer Fabio Ciancetti. Together they illustrate this theme. There are a lot of shots of T.H.O. and Isabel in front of mirrors, looking in mirrors, whereas Matthew often seems to be standing before a window and looking outside, looking to the outside world, kind of he's also a child, he's also immature, but he's wondering, what's going on. He's looking beyond and outside himself in a way that T.H.O and Isabel don't. But lest you think that this visual device of the mirrors and the windows is some sort of stagey thing, the kind that you were told was really cool in your Ivy English class, but was actually kind of lame and stuffy. Well, the Dreamers is absolutely not a stuffy movie. It's extraordinarily bright and colorful and vibrant. Their red and orange are major motifs in the movie. The aforementioned red beret that Isabel wears being a part of that, but also just it comes alive with humor and laughter and joy, whether Matthew and T.H.O are arguing about whether Jimi Hendrix or Eric Clapton is better, or whether Charlie Chaplin or Buster Keaton is better, or where they're running with Isabel through a museum trying to outpace the guards who are trying to chase them down and arrest them. It's a thrilling movie to watch. It's a beautiful, exciting journey about three friends who are just enjoying life. But there is a darker undertone as well, and I think the movie would not be complete without that. Absolutely not. The Matthew, even though he wants to help T.H.O and Isabel break out of their tightly sealed world, and even though he wants to break out of that world himself, he ultimately falls in love with it. There's a big scene where he convinces Isabel to go out with him out on a date. And they go out on the town and go to the movies and drink a soda together. And but then after that, he comes back. He comes back to the apartment and comes back to just lounging around and drinking wine and hanging out with his friends. So even though he wants to break free, he also wants what T.H.O and Isabel want, which is to be protected, be safe in this childlike world, which is symbolized in a scene where they all start hanging out together in a tent, which is very much like a kid thing. And yet there's this divide between Matthew and the twins. He loves them. He loves them very much, and we see this through his romantic relationship with Isabel, but also his relationship with T.H.O, which is very competitive, because they see each other as rivals for Isabel's affection. So there's that element, but there's also an intimacy as well, and it's summed up very well in the final scene in which Matthew kisses not only Isabel but T.H.O as well. But the tragic thing is, there's we ultimately come to realize that Matthew can talk to the twins. He can try and help them to see his perspective, but their friendship is doomed. It's a tragic friendship. They can't all be friends, and that's that's painful, but it's also what I love about the movie. I love when I first saw the movie, I was I hated the final scene. It's the scene. Spoiler alert. Stop watching now if you don't want to know, but I'll try not to say too much. This final scene is set on the streets of Paris in the midst of a protest, and it's when Matthew parts from T.H.O and Isabel, presumably for the final time, although we don't know that for sure. And he, as they go, he watches them for a minute, but then he turns around and walks against the crowd, walking away from them. And that's when you know that he's lost them, that he's tried to connect with them, to be their friend, because he loves them, he cares about them. But even though they have so much in common and have so much fun together, he ultimately realizes that it's hopeless. They'll always be too different, see the world in such completely different ways that they can never truly connect. And that's an incredibly sad thing, and the movie, it gives the movie a complete arc, but a rather sad, downbeat note. But I wouldn't want it any other way, because I love the movie and think it's... I love the characters, and I care about them. I love them. I mean, I've watched the film enough times that their eccentricities, you know, whether it's the way Isabel kind of flounces about, or the way T.H.O gets pissed off at everyone, from Matthew to the classmate who badgers him. I love those things about them. I love them for their imperfections. I also love that The Dreamers is an adaptation. It's based on Gilbert Adair's novel The Holy Innocents, but it's not a straight adaptation. It's very different. There are some lines in scenarios that have been taken directly from the book, but The Dreamers has a completely different ending, a completely different message. The Holy Innocents is basically about how it basically paints Matthew as this sort of noble figure who the twins ultimately learn to appreciate. Whereas in the movie, in The Dreamers, the tragedy is that Matthew chooses to walk away from the twins because he knows they will never appreciate him. And that's something that again, I think we can all relate to. I think it's a common thing. And, yeah. I'm ultimately somewhat at a loss for words, because The Dreamers is a sad, beautiful, witty, emotionally overwhelming movie that kind of busts your worldview open, both because it ends so abruptly and because it challenges your views on, you know, what's right in life. I mean, you know, who's to say whether Matthew's more conventional view of what a proper citizen of society does is better than T.H.O and Isabel's view, which is that you may as well just have fun and hang around the apartment. So, just to conclude, you should watch The Dreamers on a day when you're in the mood to see something that makes you feel happy and sad at the same time. Something where you're prepared to invest emotionally and be overwhelmed, but also to have fun, because it is a joyous movie, and it's about people enjoying each other's company and falling in love, whether that's platonic or romantic. So be sure to check back 1 week from today when the series on my favorite films of the 2000s continues. Next week, as we continue on in alphabetical order, I will be talking about Darren Aronofsky's The Fountain, starring Hugh Jackman and Rachel Weisz, and let me tell you, it's going to be a trip. Good evening, good night, and thank you for watching.